Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sara, President of PWA, Professional Women's Association of Rome. Since 1992, PWA has been operating in Rome as a non-profit association. We created a unique place for empowered women who have distinguished themselves for their skills, human qualities, courage, sensitivity, determination, but also models to follow for the younger generations. We made it our mission to support professional women from diverse cultural environments, and under my leadership, together with the incumbent board, we led initiatives to empower women to thrive through continual transformation. Technology and digitalization have been moving forward and were accelerated by the pandemic, and women definitely have to improve their digital skills to be able to thrive in the coming decades. PWI believes that women have unique opportunity to lead this long overdue transformation. Our core activities focus on encouraging each other and supports women to play a more active role in the digital era across the professional community in all industries by advancing careers, fostering alliances, and preparing the current and next generation of professionals. We have been forced to rethink and innovate ourselves, which has developed our digital relationship. But I believe that technology is a cross-cutting element in our life, and success will be when the inclusion of women comes into reality in all policies, including when they are integrated into the introduction of the well-being of our society. Last month, we've learned about building resilience in the organization, and the individual is the key to success. This includes prioritizing well-being, clarifying goals, cultivating empathy, creating psychological safety, and most of all, being active in a community like the PWA. With the combined forces of technology and globalizations, there's no better time to transform our current way of life into one with more economic gender inclusivity. And tonight, we will find out how to shape success through effective communication in the digital world with expert panelists. With pleasure, I'd like to introduce you my colleague and friend, PWA Programming Director, Catherine Costa-Jew, who will moderate the panel tonight. Catherine.
Thank you very much, Carli, for this presentation. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here this night. As you have seen, we have prepared a very outstanding panel. We will be talking about effective communication in the digital era, but generally we will see what does it take to be an effective communicator. As all we know, effective communication is an essential social skill to be successful both in the personal and in the professional life. It's the first soft skills that is requested in job interviews, but also it's one of the first skills that we've been evaluating when we do our jobs. So it's very important to be an effective communicator for individual, but it's also important also for corporation, because as we will see throughout the conference, successful corporations and their success also depends very much on their communication campaigns. So without taking more the floor to our panelists, I will move to our first guest, who is Professor Richard Vogel. He's an associate professor of media communication at the Lincoln Memorial University in Harrogate, Tennessee, USA. But before joining the university, he has been consulting producer to an award-winning news program. He's a writer, a producer, and a director of numerous corporate video, as well as public service announcements. So he has an extending experience on communication. And among the many things, he's also a Fulbright scholar. And this is how we get to know each other throughout the scholarship and throughout the network. He's today here to give us back and to tell us, Professor, what does it take to be an effective communicator? What are the essential skills? Can you provide us the framework and your expertise on this matter? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. In the fall of 2018, I traveled to Myanmar, a city in Lasho, the city of Lasho there, to talk with young women seeking to learn how to effectively communicate with the male leaders of their very conservative small villages. These women hoped to encourage the leaders of those communities to support equality between men and women. Through an interpreter, I gave a talk about media literacy and deconstructing advertisements to help them better understand the intent of those ads, especially in terms of how the ads represent expected roles of women. After I was done, I realized I had not served those young, extraordinary women as well as I could have. While I hope I taught them about the media and its influence, I had not explained to them how to influence others. I should have presented them with basic theories of persuasion. I should have presented them with ideas about the importance of acknowledging the needs of your audience and explaining how new ideas might meet their perceived needs, and the need to connect new ideas to existing needs, existing ideas. Effective communication always comes down to knowing your target audience and constructing a targeted message to reach that targeted audience. Feeling strongly is not sufficient to be able to get others to feel strongly. We must ascertain the needs of our audience and meet those needs, or present new needs to the audience and then show how our proposal will meet those needs. The communities in Myanmar these young women came from are very conservative, and I don't know enough of Burmese society to suggest what needs are present in their communities. But I know persuasion can't proceed without focusing on the audience. I also want to acknowledge right now that there are people in Myanmar, including some friends of mine, that are battling right now for basic freedoms. And they're using social media, when available, to communicate what's going on to their peers and to the world. Different audiences have different needs, of course, and different base knowledge to begin with. In America, we can find the needs of the community and aim for the needs of the individual. Because again, we need to look at community needs, but also individuals within that community have needs. The purpose of the classes I teach is not to persuade people how to feel on issues. However, I do try to persuade my students, when appropriate, that their knowledge of media literacy, understanding the motivations of media content producers, understanding how the producers use their production elements to get a specific reaction, and how messages have both text and subtext to consider. All these things are very important to understand under the umbrella of media literacy. To take in media without the filters that media literacy provides allows for messages to be accepted without context, without the critical thinking process that we all need to possess to make sure we don't get fooled. When it comes to gender issues in America, or topics such as the debacle that was the last American election, or many other issues, the lack of media literacy was, in my opinion, a primary enabler of schisms in our society. The ability to ascertain fact from opinion, to ascertain actual facts from fiction, and how the media may manipulate its audience is essential to facilitate communication in society. There are some basic skills we need that our viewers, our readers, our listeners may not have, that allows manipulation by sometimes unethical sources. Awareness of how communication theories such as parasocial interaction, confirmation bias, and perhaps a sense of learned helplessness that may be spreading in a societal level all serve to partially explain the split in societies and the inability to communicate effectively. Where does the responsibility lie to overcome our communication issues that manifest in social issues and so many other problems? The individual can learn through media literacy how to ascertain a quality informed source from merely an ideological source with a political or social agenda. The communicator can understand the ethics of effective communication and understand the theories behind communication at all levels that predict the reactions of the receivers. Understanding the potential effects of communication on the receivers can lead to more ethical communication and pro-social actions. However, the knowledge of those theories also enables the unethical to reach vulnerable constituencies and potentially manipulate them. We also need to remember that the person doing the communicating has brought into the communication how others perceive them, whether it is the communicator's perceived agenda, the communicator's perceived bias, or perceived chip on the shoulder. How messages are received are largely determined by perceptions of the speaker. That's another variable that in communication needs to be considered. Perhaps it's too late for my generation to overcome all the challenges that stand between truth and what we get from all the media that's now available to us. The long-term approach I hope to see in what I went to Bangkok to do my Fulbright scholarship with, to present a K through 12 curriculum offering media literacy and critical thinking education. It can start in kindergarten. No age is too young to start teaching fact from fiction and truth from lies. As for today, to help society evolve in the short term, be aware of your audience's biases and needs. Being right is not always sufficient to win over hearts and minds. We have to prove to those that receive any messages that acceptance of that message helps the receiver fulfill their own needs, whether those needs are personal, interpersonal, or societal. Good persuasion starts with recognizing, establishing, and filling the needs of your target audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, very much for this interesting speech. So we take it from Professor that one of the most important things when you want to be an effective communicator is that you have to know your target audience, you have to know the needs of your target audience, and the platform you will transmit your message. And taking it from here, I'm passing the word to our next speaker, who is Sara Canals, and who she surely knows how to target her audience. She is, among the many things, a TV host and broadcast journalist specialized in international relationships. She's currently based in Paris, as we saw, but she has been working and she has been the frequent contributor to BBC, CNN, and other international medias on very important topics, including she has been covering for the COVID pandemic, she has been covering for the terroristic attacks, so she really knows how to target her audience. And among the many markets she has been working on is the sport one. She has been host for the La Liga News, and she has been also host of Inside Barça. So I leave the floor to Sara. Sara, if you can tell us a little bit of how you proceed, how you target your audience, how you adapt your contribution to the audience, and what has been the challenges that you have been facing while doing that. Also being a woman. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, Kat, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. And as you mentioned, I will try to give you some tips, but mostly based on my experience as a journalist. So before getting into detail, I will quickly walk you through what I do. I'm currently based in Paris. As you saw, I moved here 6 months ago, so I'm still adapting to this new lifestyle. And I work as a freelance correspondent for different media. Most of my clients are from Spain. I work for a national TV, for a radio, for a newspaper, but I also contribute to the BBC and with Latin American stations. I mostly report on French issues, but I also cover Central European breaking news for the Spanish TV station. And before Paris, I lived in Barcelona for 4 years. On the one hand, I was a contributor to the BBC and CNN. I reported on Catalan and Spanish topics since the Barcelona terror attacks back in 2017. And I also covered topics including general elections or the Catalan independence movement. On the other hand, I have been, as Caterina said, a TV presenter in the sport industry in the past 3 years. I hosted a daily news show for the Spanish Football League's broadcaster, La Liga TV, for a global English-speaking audience. And I also presented and produced a show for FC Barcelona aired in the United States. So basically, I am constantly switching languages. I report in English, in Spanish, and Catalan, which is my mother tongue. And also, I am constantly adapting a message or a content to a specific media or audience, and trying to communicating in an effective way is a big part of my job. So I consider that it's a never-ending learning process, even more in the digital era, in which platforms are constantly changing, and it can be sometimes quite challenging. Now, getting more into detail, the two main elements that I consider crucial in order to communicate in an effective way are the audience, as Dr. Vogel greatly pointed out and mentioned, and also the platform in which you will communicate. So when it comes to the audience, I always ask myself, who am I sending the message to? And this can be applied to any area, professional area, right? Am I speaking to a group of women in Myanmar? Am I speaking to media consumers from a specific country, potential investors, a group of students? And of course, the more you know about your audience, the better. And if you have even the chance to get feedback and listen to your listeners, way better. Once I identify my audience, I try to acknowledge their needs. Also, as mentioned by Professor Vogel, I ask myself in this regard, why would be people interested in a certain topic? How can they relate to it? And therefore feel engaged with my message. Engagement is always key to be effective, right? So as a Paris correspondent and freelance, working with many media, this set of questions are the first thing that I do in the morning when I plan the stories that I would like to report about for the week. First of all, I filter what's newsworthy. In this process, there are different elements to take into account that maybe are useful to you. We've got the element of magnitude or impact, which is how many people will be interested in or affected by a story. COVID here is the best example for this, as the entire world is now affected by the same pandemic, and all of my clients, the shows with which I contribute from Spain to England to Latin America, they are all interested in how France is handling the pandemic because it affects us all. We've also got the element of prominence, which relates to high-profile individuals, events, or icons. For instance, all the media I work with are interested in all things related to the Eiffel Tower, for example. And another key element is proximity, which can be geographical or psychological. In this regard, the amount of stories that I cover for Spanish media is way bigger than the live connections that I do for the BBC or for Latin American TV stations, because as neighboring countries, France and Spain, they share a lot of things. They share a border, they share culture similarities, they might be affected by the same issues just because they are so close to each other, and they mirror each other also in many ways on how to handle certain issues and certain policies. So this is something that drastically changed in my move from Barcelona to Paris. And other elements that are also worth considering are unusualness. When something is unique, it's always interesting. And then we've got a controversy or conflict, which is also newsworthy. And here we could include maybe breaking news, right? The recent events on Myanmar, right, that we are all following. Once I filter what's newsworthy, I pitch the story to my editors. It's the first filter. They are the ones to decide if it's interesting and worth being aired or published. And once I get their green light, I do the reporting, which means gathering all the elements, building my story, and then adapting the content to the audience or the platform. And finally, I perform the story through the platform, right? TV connection, radio chronicle, an article that will be published in a newspaper, and this is later adapted to digital or social media. This is basically my main steps. The first thing that how I operate as a freelance correspondent. So this last step, the performing through the platform, brings us to the second element that I believe it's key to effectively communicate, which is the platform, right? I believe every platform is different and effective on its own way. For example, in radio, sounds and silences can be really powerful. In TV, your facial expression is just as important as your speech. Those are obviously traditional media, but in the digital era, in which digital and social media are leading the way, we're experiencing a huge diversification of platforms. And I'm sure here we will hear from experts that can tell you more about this. and platforms that are constantly changing. And I think it can be sometimes intimidating. I am a millennial, for instance, and I find it difficult to understand the platforms that younger audiences, Zillennials or the Generation Z are using these days and their way of communicating. Twitch is a good example of that. It started as a platform mostly for gamers, but now there are many content creators live streaming on Twitch. Even American elections, we saw some journalists doing live streamers for 10 hours reporting on the elections. I found that really impressive. And we've seen also the rise of TikTok in the last year, and actually traditional media, case in point, the Washington Post have their own TikTok people with the goal of attracting younger audiences and keeping the content sort of up to date. And having said that, I find it crucial to understand the platform where your message will be taking place, spending some time exploring, interacting with the users, getting familiar with it before adventuring out and launching a content out there. So yes, understanding your platform implies also understanding consumption, how the audience behaves. In the digital world, there's a growing trend of using fast-paced messages aiming to attract short attention spans. Media and content creators constantly use these fast-paced messages as a hook to lead the audience into a deeper message or content. Example of it, an Instagram story that aims to drag the viewer into an Instagram video on IGTV, where you can go deeper into a specific topic. And this is where the platforms for specialized content are extremely useful. We've got YouTube, IGTV, Twitch, podcasts, newsletters, and so on. Then, yeah, I don't want to finish before wrapping it up. I want to talk about the role of women in the media industry. Like in many areas, women have been facing challenges for many years. The media industry is no exception. Sometimes it becomes even more evident because of the visibility that the profession entails. And there are multiple challenges here. We've got gender inequalities, underrepresentation, both on and off the screen, and also when it comes to leading roles, and also safety issues, right? Journalism can be a dangerous profession when reporting from the field, and sadly, being a woman can make it even more dangerous depending on the region or the context where you report from. And as of my experience as a female journalist in the TV and sports industry, which at least in Spain has been historically run by men, I've seen how sometimes women are not taken seriously and constantly have to prove themselves, proving that they own their roles. And I've been there many times, and colleagues of mine have been also there many times. But on a positive note, and this is how I want to finish this, I have also seen how many media companies are working towards changing certain behaviors and trends. For instance, BBC Sports, with which I contribute sometimes, are now trying to make their programs and stories gender balanced, giving voice to women experts and journalists. And in Spain, for example, even if there's still a long way to go, things are changing. Female experts are more numerous, and big influential media are also giving us more voice. That's all for me, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Sara, for this interesting contribution. We saw also from you how important it is to target and to understand the needs of the audience, and also how important is adaptability, the passing from what was known as traditional media to social media. And so adaptability is something, a skill that our next speaker has for sure. Her name is Mariana Simeone. She's the Quebec delegate to Italy. She has joined the Ministère de la Relation Internationale et de la Francophonie after an extremely brilliant career as a journalist. She has been a host, a commentator, and a report, and she has been broadcasting in 3 different languages, English, Italian, and French. Thanks to her outstanding work, she has received a lot of recognitions, including the Knight of the Order of Italy, and she has received also the Queen Elizabeth II Golden Jubilee medal, which is actually hard to pronounce. The floor is yours. Can you give us a little bit of your experience on passing from what was traditional media to what is now social media? And then maybe talking a little bit on what does it mean to work and to communicate on behalf of a government or a state entity, for providing some tips for some of our audience who might need that for the future or now? Thank you very much.
Merci à vous, Catherine. Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. Je suis ravie d'être avec vous. Merci de l'invitation. And we will switch now into English. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be with you. Thank you to the Professional Women's Association of Rome for this kind invitation. Thank you to Milena Padula for thinking of me. Greetings to my fellow panelists. I'm very happy to meet you. And greetings to our audience. Effective communication in the digital era. Wow, never has the task of communicating been more daunting, at least in my lifetime. Digital technology has been the extreme disruptor, and perhaps no other discipline has felt the force of this disruption with such intensity, with such speed as the area of communication. The digital evolution transformed the world of the communicators as they were practicing their art. Let me explain. I spent close to 15 years of my professional life in broadcast journalism. Like Sara, I was both in radio and television. I was a reporter, an anchor, a commentator. I worked in 3 languages, and I was for many years with the CBC in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, working in the newsroom. So we produced the 6 o'clock news and the late night newscast. And I, as a news commentator, had a very privileged relationship with our audience. Now, why am I giving you all this background? Well, I'm setting the stage because I want to share with you how we, the professionals of the industry, live this digital revolution on the ground. The 6 o'clock newscast suddenly lost its 6 o'clock appeal. We no longer had an evening appointment with our viewers because suddenly viewers no longer needed to wait for 6 o'clock. Why? When they could look for the content whenever they want, wherever they chose, and how they chose, which meant anytime and anywhere. We no longer had a date at 6 o'clock. On the one side, digital had a multiplier effect on our work. That great interview with the city mayor could be seen over and over again, or my commentary pieces could be viewed even by my friends and my colleagues abroad. So digital had changed everything until social media changed absolutely everything else. Now suddenly, we no longer were the exclusive publishers of news. No longer could we hide away in our studios. We were suddenly thrust into an ongoing, live, and engaging dialogue with our viewers. Social media turned our broadcast into a conversation. Our viewers suddenly became journalists themselves. They were reporters, they were commentators, certainly. Anyone who had a smartphone could report on any given topic. Anyone with the power of persuasion could engage audiences. Anyone could become an influencer. So the digital era democratized information. It engaged the audiences. It grouped together like-minded people, created communities very much like this one, armed people with the tools to inform, to influence, to persuade. It was marvelous, but at the same time, it was damn scary. I remember when we first started using social media, it wasn't a game for us. We were tasked with engaging our audiences on social media, but we still had to respect the ethical and moral codes of journalistic integrity. Now I'd like to pick up on the point Sara raised about crafting her message and targeting audiences based on geography. In Canada, and especially in French Canada, the experience is totally different. Here you have one geography, Canada, and different cultural sensitivities. What I would say on air, say during a debate or commentary to an English-speaking audience, well, I could not simply translate it when I spoke to a French-speaking audience. The cultural references are different. They may read different books, watch different movies, listen to different newscasts. The sensitivities are different. Le vécu, as we say, their life experiences could be very different. So in order to connect with different linguistic audiences, I had to be sure to respect those differences. And that meant addressing the issues most important to them, make references that were current and pertinent to that community, draw on the lessons of history that were theirs, and especially understand the sensitivities, the idiosyncrasies, and the positions they held. So how does a foreign government representative who was once a journalist communicate now that she's a government officer? Well, that was another revolution in my life. Communicating on behalf of a government bears enormous responsibility. It demands great discipline and self-restraint. You must be accurate, detailed, and very clear. There is no room for ambiguity or misunderstandings when you're speaking to one government on behalf of yours. The choice of words is important, the tone even more so. And body language, it works subliminally and plays on our emotions. We've not yet grasped the importance and the role of body language. Then there's the art of listening. Listening is key in effectively communicating, and it is highly underestimated. Another skill a diplomat needs to hone is the ability to be reserved, low-key, and especially to know that his personal view on a given political issue is not to be expressed. If your government has a position on an issue, then that position is yours. You defend it and you never let your personal feelings get in the way. And if you can't, then you know you either have the wrong job or you're working for the wrong government. Governments have always been careful in projecting their image, their brand on the world stage. And we in government are very fortunate to work with highly professional communication experts. However, I have to say that you may have the best press lines or the most talented writer prepare a speech for you. The trick in connecting with your foreign office, when you're representing, as in my case, the government of a North American federated state, a French-speaking province in a young country as is Canada. The key to communicating effectively here with Italians, for example, is the ability to take a government message, adapt it to your environment, make it relevant to your audience, and deliver it with passion, persuasion, and a little pizzazz. Then you've got to be able to deliver the same quality message on social media, and there it's a totally different game. You know, a speech delivered in person in a courtyard of the parliament, it commands respect, it delivers authority. The setting alone contributes to its efficacy. A lonely tweet posted quickly as you scurry between two meetings may not have the same impact. So how do we as heads of mission communicate effectively in the digital era? Here's my approach and the guidelines I follow in 7 points. 1, choose your target audience. Am I speaking to Italians, Canadians, Quebecers, Romans, Milanese? Know your audience. It's not enough to speak the language. It's not enough to speak Italian. You need to be versed in the cultural attitudes, the social values of that linguistic group. And you especially need to understand the behaviors of your audience. 3, be relevant. Is your message of interest? Will it have an impact? Does it have in any way an effect on people's lives? Or is it just more mumbo jumbo? In the seamless universe of digital, timing is still a critical element of effectively communicating a message. Be sure to communicate at the right time. Words matter. Craft your message so it can inform and intrigue, create a buzz, capture attention, raise interest. 6, be original and be thought-provoking. Make the message yours. Do not simply rehash someone else's thoughts. When sharing a post, for example, on social media, make it distinctly relevant to your audience by enriching the core message. Make it yours. 7, remember you're speaking to people, be it the Prime Minister or a television audience of hundreds of thousands of viewers. You are always speaking to one single person, and you need to intuitively connect to his or her emotions. What stirs passions? What pleases? What displeases? That's what effective communication must be able to do. Stir an emotion. You have to make that connection, that personal connection. So let me leave you with this. Why did hundreds of thousands of Americans travel to the National Mall in Washington, D.C. on a hot, sunny August day in 1963 to listen to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Not because he had a great speech that started with, "I have a dream." 250,000 Americans made their way to Washington, D.C. because the message Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered was about their dream. And here is the question. How would Martin Luther King Jr. have delivered that message on Twitter today? I've enjoyed speaking to you very, very much. I look forward to listening to the other panelists, and I would be very happy to answer your questions at the end of the presentations. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much for this very passionate speech and for letting us know the 7 steps to effective communication. We will see now how effective communication applies to corporation, especially in times of crisis, how corporations have adapted their communication campaign. And we will leave the floor to Elena Di Giovanni, who is the co-founder of Comin and Partners. She specializes in corporate communication, corporate social responsibility, and as well the promotion of cultural heritage. She has worked for Expo 2015, and among her many clients, we have big corporations like Vodafone, Espresso, and so on. She, among other, the coordinates of the course of corporate social responsibility and stakeholder management. Ms. Giovanni, can you give us a little bit of an idea of what corporations are doing to adapt to the COVID crisis? How are they communicating both on media and social media? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for the invitation. It's not easy to speak after Sara and Marianna, but I will not follow my notes, so I will try to speak frankly to the audience. And I would like to start from March 11th, when the pandemic was announced and was declared that was a pandemic, a worldwide pandemic, and all the communication changed for everybody, changed in every house, in every family, in every business. So normally we had all the world stopped, was locked down, and the communication concentrated itself in 2 boxes. Normally we have 5 instruments to communicate. Before we had events, meeting one-to-one, advertising. Sorry, maybe someone has the volume because I cannot hear a noise. I listen a noise.
Your microphone?
No, it's not my microphone. It's the microphone of someone else. Sorry. Thank you very much. So the world stopped and everybody was locked down, and the communication concentrated all in the traditional media, radio, press, and social media. The digital started to be the center, the focus of our life and of our companies. At the beginning started a good viral communication. I'm talking about Italy, where we had a concentration of traffic of 40% more of in internet, and started a kind of good communication because everybody was looking for news about pandemic from a leader, from the government, and started also a good communication with all the VIP famous people, which started to post a viral video saying stay at home. We had this hashtag Io resto a casa, and there was a viral good communication. And also our government, talking about government, as Marianna explained before, the communication about government, our Prime Minister made a conference in Facebook that for us was something that never happened. Normally the important press conference like this, we were as in a period of war, done in Facebook, shocked everybody. But everybody was concentrated on these instruments. And also in the same moment started also a problem, the fake news. So started a kind of wrong information called infodemia that was about the fake news. So all the I have some numbers that the 60% of the news were concentrated on the coronavirus, and of these 60% of news, the 13 were fake news. This was Italy, was a confusion, but here I come to our main focus, the women, and what distinguished women in this period, also the clear communication, because as we can see, the female leadership emerged stronger in this period. The countries led by women had the best communication. For example, Germany with Angela Merkel, she was very clear, very fulfilled, and she was very transparent with the German people. The same did the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, and she dealt very well also with the numbers in the hospital, because she made a clear communication. It was depending from the communication. It was all a question of communication, and also digital communication, as well as Sana Marine. So the women distinguished in had a clear communication and also to deal with this pandemic. But how react the companies in Italy? And here I come back to my job, because with my Comin and partners, with my partners, we deal every day with companies. At the beginning, we were afraid to stop our activities because all the world stopped. But on the contrary, we had a different behavior. All the companies started to need a different strategies. So we started to work a lot from home to build different strategies for our companies. So to allow them to communicate in another way. So we invented also another way to communicate. My two partners wrote also a book about this in infodemia and the different way of communicate. And we started to do a work with our clients and to help them to communicate outside, because some companies decided to communicate outside, but not avoid to talk about coronavirus. So they were giving also messages to the people to keep the distance, to stay at home. And we help the company in this, and we help also the company to communicate, to help government to manage this problem. But the companies also need a lot work in internal communication. They had to deal, all the companies had to deal with the people, the employees at home, with this smart working. That was a very nice word before, and all the companies were starting to have this smart working, but they found obliged to have all the people in smart working. It was not easy to do meeting, conferences and smart working. So we started to build strategies for the companies to do internal communication. It was incredible because the CEO entered in the house, in the apartment of the employees, also realizing the difficulties of some women, which had to deal with, for example, in a board with 4 children in a room, maybe not with big apartments. So also the CEO realized the situation of the employees, and this kind of communication kept the people closer. I think that this was a good effect in the bad situation. And this situation of smart working was, of course, accelerated by the pandemic. But another thing that happened also in this period with the communication that was accelerated, not only the smart working, but also the attention for the sustainability. If you remember, all the countries and EU countries signed an agreement for the sustainability objective of 2030. And in this moment in Italy, there was an acceleration. There was a focus on these issues, and started a new platform to measure also what the companies were doing to sustain the world. So as everybody knows now, ESG, environment, social, and gender, is very important for the public companies, but become more and more important during the pandemic and become more and more important for this kind of communication, we changed completely. So I don't want to take other time because there is my omonimo Tommaso Di Giovanni, who is our client with Philip Morris, who has to speak. So I want to leave the floor to Tommaso with 3 suggestions to give to you. One is to have more attention to digital tools. As Mariana was saying, everybody become a journalist. Now everybody is writing now posts and articles. So I think that we need rules for this, so more attention and also regulation for the digital communication. Otherwise, the infodemia restarts. Another suggestion is the focus on diversity and inclusion is very important. Now we are starting in Italy also with to have a great attention for the gender. As you know, we have the new government with Draghi, and there was a big discussion because we have just 8 women in the government. But I think that we have not to make a discussion on this, but we have to help these 8 women and also the rest of the men, but to help the gender, we have to help these 8 women, and we have to focus to help the women and the companies to deal with this argument. And the third, that is not the last, but I take in the first, is the environment. We have to save the planet. This is very important, and I leave the floor to Tommaso. That will be very hard because save the planet, but we know that Philip Morris is doing a lot of things to save the planet. So thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you very much to everybody. And
Thank you very much, Elena, for this speech. To cite Draghi, whatever it takes to take sustainability, environment, and diversity and inclusion to where should it be. And so now we, in fact, going to pass the word to Tommaso Di Giovanni. As Professor Vogel said at the very beginning, what is important in communication is also to be aware of the reputation of the communicator. And when it comes to reputation and problems related to reputation, Tommaso probably knows something because, as was already mentioned, he is the Vice President Global Communication at Philip Morris International, where he has been leading the development of corporate communication campaigns around the world. He is very concentrated on innovation technology, but with relation to a very specific product that Philip Morris has launched, I think in 2016, if I'm not wrong, which is the smoke-free, right? Smoke-free products. And so, Tommaso, please tell us, what are the challenges related to a business such as the one of Philip Morris, especially when it comes to communication that raises issues related to litigation and so on and so forth? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. It's great to be with you today and to see many familiar faces with PWA, an association that I feel very close to me for personal reasons and for the very good years that we had in Rome, working also with you guys. This just brings back very good memories, and I'm very honored to be here with you. Look, the case I'm gonna discuss is obviously the case of my company, and it's a bit of a tale of progress, skepticism, and how communication can help overcome skepticism. You probably don't know it, and in 5, 7, 8 minutes, it's difficult to give a broad dissertation about the topic. But you probably know us, Philip Morris International, as a tobacco company, and you probably think of us as a cigarette. That's what comes to mind with all the controversies of the past. And yes, as you mentioned, of course, our reputation isn't the highest. We know it. We know that we come with skepticism, but we also know that there's a big gap out there in terms of understanding what the company is doing, what is our ambition. Yes, we used to be a cigarette company, but over 20 years ago, as you said it, actually almost 20 years ago, we've embarked into investments in science, in technology, in innovation, that gave their fruit approximately in a decade ago. And by 2016, we've actually committed publicly to replace all cigarettes with products that are a better choice for adult smokers. This may come as a surprise, but the fact is that the vast majority of harmful compounds found in cigarette smoke come from the burning. So the moment you eliminate the burning, you automatically reduce by 95% the level of those compounds, and the products that you can manufacture and sell are a totally different ballgame versus cigarettes. And this is something that a growing number of independent research is proving. Recently, thinking about the US, the Food and Drug Administration authorized our pioneering product to be commercialized in the States as a reduced exposure alternative for cigarettes, and they clearly said it can promote public health. So this is a bit of background so you understand the challenge of communications. Today we have 70 million smokers worldwide who already switched to these heated tobacco products. 72% of them stopped cigarettes entirely. So they don't smoke anymore. And this is probably one of the biggest advancements potentially for public health that have been seen recently in terms of numbers. It's not us, but there's associations like the American Cancer Society that says that today. So what is, and this is where I'm getting at, what is the implication of this for communications? You would probably wonder. Well, let me tell you this, and let me put something on a screen. I think I'm the only one who's old enough in his mind that I still use slides, but let me try to put one up so that the first implication will become clear to you. I hope you can see my screen, hopefully.
We do.
Yes, yes, we can see it.
So you probably see the first challenge we face, and it's a challenge that only communications can overcome. It's skepticism. Any innovation, and here we're talking about innovations that are based on science, innovations that are based on technology, any innovation is usually met with skepticism. It's normal. Human beings resist to change. It's if you think about, we're in Italy, so what happened with Galileo when he started questioning whether this is the sun that rotates around the earth or vice versa, following Copernicus, you know very well what happened with him. I don't want to compare this to that, but it's just an example of how skepticism can play a role. Here we have products that can be an important additional help for public health, but still the products face skepticism, we face skepticism. It's fine, we know it, but that's probably our biggest challenge and one that is very relevant for communication. But let me give you the second challenge of communications. It's that there is confusion out there. So people do not know the basics about smoking, health, what causes diseases. They simply don't know. We think we know, but in fact, the vast majority of us don't know. If I asked you to tell me what is the role of nicotine, I'm sure that half of the audience wouldn't know. And let me show you this confusion through another slide. On this chart, if you look at the pink line and the blue line, they show perceptions of relative risk of cigarettes and of nicotine in 7 countries. This is a research that was conducted a year or so ago. And you see that the 2 lines are very close. So just remember this. People in 7 countries still believe that nicotine and cigarettes carry more or less the same risk. There's only 1 country in which there is a bit of a gap, only 1. If I show you the next slide, you will understand why this is a problem. Those are statements made by the Food and Drug Administration and by the UK National Institute for Healthcare and Excellence. I have a list of approximately 60 statements from different organizations around the world that say exactly this. It's unanimous. And the key is, contrary to what people think, nicotine is not the primary cause of smoking-related diseases. That cause is to be found in the harmful compounds that are in cigarette smoke, but people don't know this. Now, let's be clear, nicotine is not risk-free and it's addictive. That's not the point, but it's not what causes diseases. Why is this important? Because if people are confused, and we know that the vast majority of smokers are going to continue to use cigarettes in the next few years. Even the WHO says regardless of all the efforts, there will be in 2025 the same number of smokers as we have today around the globe. If people are confused, if smokers are confused, they're going to end up using cigarettes if they don't quit. And that's to the detriment of their health and public health, particularly today where options are instead available. And this is what happens. This is research from Public Health England that basically says that after the Valley crisis that I'll describe in a second, if before the Valley crisis, 45% of smokers were ready to pass on to smoke products that do not combust, that percentage went down to 34. There's basically 3/4 of smokers who don't even understand that abandoning a cigarette to go to any cigarette is actually a step forward for your health. They simply don't get it. And there's data like this from basically virtually all countries around the world. So this is the challenge we're facing with communications and the one that we want to overcome. And it's for this reason that we ramped up our communications in the last few years. It's for this reason that we decided to use, we're talking about digital, of course we use digital channels, of course we use social channels, but we decided to be out there. We decided that our scientists had to go out and speak at conferences. We decided that our leaders have to be on stage. One of those pictures is actually from our CEO in Davos, where we provoked a discussion about those products. We decided we have to do this, not only because we have a vision, and that vision is to replace cigarettes for good with better alternatives, which makes sense for our business and for public health. But we decided that we have to do it because it's also our responsibility. We have products that are less harmful. We need to make sure that smokers switch to them. And as we did that, we even decided to launch a full-fledged campaign called Unsmoke. The idea of Unsmoke is not mine. It's somebody much more clever than me in advertising that thought that the real problem is smoke. It's burning. So whatever doesn't have smoke is better. Call it Unsmoke and give a clear call for action to governments, NGOs, the scientific community, anyone who has a role and who can play this role in the change, and make it very simple. The message needs to be 3 lines. It needs to be, if you don't smoke, don't start. That's the basic, because smoking causes diseases. Let's be totally clear about that. Second line is, if you smoke, quit, because let's face it, that is the best thing that anyone can do for their health when they smoke. But if you don't quit, and we know 9 out of 10 smokers simply don't quit, change. Because today there is technology, there is science, there are options that are a much better alternative for you. So this is the bulk of a campaign that we've implemented in over 60 countries today. And it's having some success, but change, as I mentioned, change is difficult. Change takes time. And let's face it, we also have opposition. There are people who simply distrust us because we are a multinational company, because we are a tobacco company. You've heard probably big tobacco. Big tobacco, for those who like rhetoric, is a typical fallacy. I call you with a name that is not the one of a person. I put you in a bucket with the whole industry that has a bad image so that you are depersonified. It's something that is usually seen in war propaganda, but it's used to demonize an enemy. It's a very smart, clever way to do it. It's not very fair, and it doesn't help the debate. That's a big challenge. So our challenge is exactly this, is how do we overcome confusion, distrust, and the confusion is very often spread in this world where everything goes digital. If you remember a year or so ago, there was an issue in the US with e-cigarettes. And that issue was that many people were unfortunately falling sick with something that is called E-Valley, which is e-cigarette vaping associated lung injury. If you Google it and you see what the headlines were, they basically were questioning e-cigarettes per se. The real issue wasn't e-cigarettes. It was the fact that the liquids were unregulated, they were sold illegally, they weren't controlled. So people used oils instead of the normal e-liquids, and oils are not dissolved by the lungs. So they gave this disease to smokers. But that unfortunately created fear among users. And many people, we have data, instead of switching to e-cigarettes, they continued using cigarettes. And that was the biggest issue that we faced at the time. It is the challenge. So look, I don't want to take more time, but I think overall, the journey I'm living with the company when it comes to changing the mindset and making sure that there's positive change out there driven by technology and science really takes me to a few learnings that I want to share with you as you discuss communications. The first one is when you're embarking into a big campaign to change perceptions, first thing is you need to be resilient. It takes time. When people have preconceived opinions, it takes time to overcome them. It's not something you do with one shot. It takes time and you need to be resilient. The second is the truth will out. When, for instance, I do interviews, very often I'm faced with fallacies, with reasonings that are simply illogical. You need to call those out. It's important because ultimately, slowly but surely, by talking facts and evidence, those will prevail. The third one is that credibility is everything. I mentioned big tobacco. It's a fact. When you don't have credibility, your journey is going to be longer. There's just no discussion. So you need to accept that. Somebody else before, actually, I think all the other speakers also mentioned how important it is to know who your audience is. Let me add something to that. There's in communications the rule of the 5-90-5. There's usually 5% of people who are already with you, who believe you. There's 5% of people who will not believe you, whatever you say. Then there's 90% of people whom you still can convince. Those are your audience. Those are the people you need to talk to. The other ones are not your target audience. Third one, the fifth one, and I'll close on this, is be consistent. Particularly when you have a credibility gap, you need to walk the talk. That means that when you declare something, when you say something, you need to act accordingly. We had, for instance, a couple of instances recently in which, look, we have a very structured marketing code, and we simply don't allow certain practices like selling to minors. We had from 1 or 2 instances in which it was dubious what happened around the world that can happen. The best thing we thought was actually, you know what, recognize the mistake immediately, correct it, and make sure it doesn't happen again. Don't try to hide mistakes, because that's the worst thing you can do. And be consistent. When you promise something, act against it. So look, those are really my 2 cents to spark a discussion. I hope it was interesting and useful, but I'm very happy to take questions as now we open the Q&A. And I hope, Catherine, that I didn't go too much over time.
You were perfect. You were perfect, and you basically said what is important today, to have science and facts at the basic of decision-making processes, whether it's going to be on the private sector, whether it's going to be on the public. Science and facts should be checked and should be known. And we will start now with the questions. I will actually start with one question, and it will be actually Tommaso, because I was thinking, you know, my mother, she's a smoker. She has been a smoker for 40 years, and she says she'll never quit, because it's not only just the smoking. It's to smoke. It's a ritual. She does it say it's a ritual. You hold the cigar, and that's it. So most of the people that smoke, this is your target. How does Philip Morris reach this type of target? How do you convince to someone that says it's a ritual, change the type of cigarettes, move to a free smoke? How you manage that?
You are nailing a very important question. The reason is the following. Cigarettes are a relatively simple product. And as you say, they come with a ritual, they come with a taste. So they're very specific. For instance, if I buy a cigarette, it takes me 30 seconds at the shop, right? I tell the brand to the shop owner, he picks it up, gives it to me, I pay, and I leave. When I buy something like our product IQOS, which is based on electronics, there's a lot of explanation that goes with it. There's after sale. Electronics are more complex to use. Just to give you one example, when you were talking about the ritual, with a product like this, you need to clean it, right? You need to make sure that it's in good shape. After a while, you need to perhaps consider changing it. You need to charge it. The ritual is different. There's no way you can have exactly the same ritual. Even the taste is slightly different, because I mean, we all are used to eating something that's burnt, right? Who doesn't like something when it's a bit crusty? Pizza, I love pizza when it's a bit burnt. It's normal because the chemistry changes. So when I don't burn tobacco, I have a change in taste that's not that big, but there is a change in taste. So all this needs to be factored in. And that's why it's very important that we keep the product appealing compared to cigarettes. It's absolutely okay to put more restrictions on cigarettes, but those products should be made appealing to smokers and only to adult smokers. They shouldn't be appealing to others. The second is it's very important that governments revisit old laws that allow some specific communications, information on the benefits and risks, so consumer can make a choice. Treating cigarettes and products that don't burn the same is a mistake, because then smokers will receive the implicit message that they are the same and they will not change. And if they don't change, they stay with cigarettes.
Thank you, Tommaso. My next question goes to Elena Di Giovanni. We read a very interesting interview on La Repubblica a couple of days ago, and I saw that among the clients that she had also Nespresso. And so this brought to me, how do you convince, for Italian coffee, it's a tradition, how do you convince to sell to Italians coffee that it's basically from Switzerland, because Nespresso it's from Switzerland? Do you have any, can you give us some of what happened around Nespresso?
In Nespresso, this was before George Clooney, I must say. And you're right, because Nespresso was a Swiss brand entering in Italy, the country of cafe, of espresso. But we worked in reputation. We tried to build a reputation around the brand Nespresso that already was up. And we started doing stakeholder engagement. So we didn't do really marketing, but we did a corporate strategy, trying to give as a gift the machine to important firm or very important law firm. And so everybody started to try this coffee, this espresso, but to live in this world. And we also positioning this brand not as a brand, a coffee brand, but as an emotion. This was the secret. And then arrived George Clooney.
Yes, George Clooney changes everything. I met the wife. I couldn't met him, but he changes everything. Well, thank you very much. So reputation, we see reputations comes again. It's very important, especially now. You're also a sustainability expert, so all the questions related to ESG are very much nails into the heart of the reputation of the company, stakeholder engagement, and so on and so forth. And so I now pass again to Professor Vogel. Professor Vogel, you have been teaching media communication outside of the United States. For instance, you have been teaching in China. How do you teach media communication to a completely different audience, where you actually, they have some different view of the freedom of speech and of communication? How do you do that successfully without getting arrested, for instance?
I've been amazed in teaching. I've taught in China, Thailand, Malaysia, and Myanmar. China scared me. I didn't know what to expect. I found an incredibly open students. They'll talk about their own government. But I found, as a guiding principle to begin with, I never said I was right and they were wrong. I'm not qualified to say any group, society, culture, government is right or wrong. And I kept some words out of it, like civil rights, like freedom. I can give information factually to the students without using words that have a different, as we just heard, emotional meaning. These words have emotional meaning, and privately people would share their thoughts on it, but I was not going to share it to a group. So I had to take into account, again, different society, politics, and different parts of China have different socioeconomic areas. So I had to take that into account. The group I was talking to and the lifestyle they had in that area. So yeah, essentially I just had to take history, context, and subtle wording. There were words, again, that could be a problem, and some that were safe and would still communicate the same ideas, and to respect their history and their society and culture. It wasn't the challenge I thought it would be. And I've taught religion there, which I'm not qualified to teach that. I did it anyway, I'm sorry. But they were open to ideas. It wasn't, again, of right and wrong. It was, here are ideas, let's talk about them. So it's just looking for subtle wording to make sure. And one subtle thing, but significant, is jargon. There's jargon I would use in teaching a class in America, I would not use in other parts of America, or if I'm lucky enough to come to Europe, use there. Jargon that's specific to my region. In China, I made sure the words were not simple in a simpler words. I'm going to stay away from multisyllabic words, polysyllabic words. They were not effective. So get to the point, don't use jargon, and remembering my audience, their perspective, and realizing I'm unqualified to say right or wrong. Here's the information I have for you to consider.
Thank you very much, Professor. Sara, I have a specific question for you. What is your personal way to make your message salient and reach the audience online? Do you have your specificity? You know, as Mariana was saying, you have to adapt it to your style. You have to make your message your own. What do you do to make it your own?
I think that the way to make it your own and to engage and sort of have this relationship with the audience is basically to try to be as spontaneous and natural as possible. I think human touch is what makes a message engaging, always trying to connect through the ideas that you feel or that you assume that will make a reaction to people. That's, I think, what I always at least try to do. And going back to what Mariana mentioned, at least behind the audience, there's always people. We're human. So I think, yes, trying to be spontaneous and natural, have these specific points, which depending on the media, it's difficult because sometimes it's very, very strict to just informing what's happening. But if we're talking about digital engagement, in which you can be a little bit more yourself, and after your reporting, share your story on social media and provide more details about what you do, I think spontaneous, I have a problem with this word. Well, being spontaneous and being natural, yeah.
And if I could add something, if you don't mind, Catherine, and also to be honest, because your viewers, your audience can see right through you if you're not honest, you know? So
I think it is the worst thing. A fake content, you can see it right away. It's like these companies trying to make viral contents. You can see they are trying too hard to make a video viral, right? That it's not successful at the end. So, well, now I'm talking about virality, but honesty is also key, yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Sara. We'll have the last question, then we close because we're keeping all of much more. I know some of the speakers really need to leave. Mariana, I'm citing here from the public. Marshall McLuhan wrote in the 60s, "The medium is the message," meaning that the way we send and receive information is more important than the information itself. How it has changed to deal with social media?
First of all, that's one great Canadian philosopher, so thank you for that quote, Marshall McLuhan. First of all, I have to say how much I enjoyed everybody's talks. They've been just marvelous. Richard and Elena, I can't wait to meet you personally in Rome, and Tommaso, just wonderful. Sara, you must do an outstanding job. I'm going to look for you on the air, absolutely. So it was great. It does change everything, but you know, and I have lived that transformation. I was there when the earthquake happened. The medium, like Sara was saying, she has to adapt it to the different platforms. You've got to really know how that platform, you know, operates. You've got to connect with the audience at the right time. You've got to be on that voyage of the client. If you're Tommaso, you've got to be on that voyage and make sure you intercept that client with the right message when he needs it. You know, Elena was talking about how they quickly moved into speaking to workers from home. So they were there at the right time. You know, everything comes into play. There's not one. Everything comes into play. Of course, the choice of words, the message, the timing, the platform that you use yourself, you know, is it visual, is it audio? How powerful is a radio still today? I mean, you listen to podcasts, you know, they're great. So not getting carried away, but what was your question about the media? How does it change today? It's changed everything. It's revolutionized everything. And it's so exciting to be 30 today and be able to do that journalism and move around freely from one platform to the next. When I was first doing journalism, if you worked in radio, you weren't allowed to step on a set of a TV. And if you worked in TV, oh, you didn't speak to people in radio. So the world has totally changed. It's dynamic now, it's fluid, it's rich. Those experiences are rich. Just go for it. Use those mediums, use them, but always follow those guidelines we spoke about. You know, the message, be truthful, be honest, be spontaneous, be original, have that passion, that persuasion, but always be honest, you know, and you'll get your audience. It works. It really does.
Thank you very much for all the panelists for this very interesting conference. It has been an honor and a pleasure to have you here this night. I hope I'll be able to meet you all soon in person. I think now we really need to close the conference. I'll just give you, in a very, I think, journalistic way, updates about the next conference, which will be on unconscious bias on the 8th of March. And we will have already a very interesting panel. So I hope to see you again soon. Have a good night, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, President. Thank you, everybody. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Great
Thank you
meeting
so
you
much.
all.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Good to meet you.
Thanks, Mariana.
Good luck with everything. Thank you. It was a lot of
Thanks
fun.
so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure
Ciao,
to
Tom. A presto.
Ciao. Ciao.
Where's
tutti.
Elena? She's gone already. I wanted to ask her something. Oh, she's gone.
Yes.